Most of us chase happiness like it's a destination, as if we'll finally arrive when we land the perfect job, find the right partner, or move into our dream home. But what if I told you that this chase might be the very thing preventing us from ever truly feeling happy? This idea isn't new, but it's uncomfortable, and that's why it's rarely spoken about. The dark truth behind happiness is that much of what we believe about it is a carefully constructed illusion, fueled by societal expectations, capitalism, social media, and a culture that profits from our constant dissatisfaction. Think about how often we're sold the idea that happiness lies just around the corner, after the next purchase, the next milestone, or the next self-improvement hack. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry built on the premise that you are not enough yet. The more we consume, whether it's content, experiences, or products, the more we feel like happiness is just one more thing we need to acquire. But this constant pursuit becomes a treadmill, not a staircase. You keep running, but you never get higher. You just exhaust yourself. This illusion of happiness is especially dangerous because it convinces us to ignore our current reality. We numb ourselves to the discomfort, believing it's a temporary hurdle before our real life begins. We learn to see happiness as a reward rather than a process, and that makes us delay living fully. Ironically, the pursuit of happiness can lead to a deep-seated sense of inadequacy. When we don't feel happy, we assume something is wrong with us, not realizing the system was rigged from the start. Social media has magnified this problem to a dangerous degree. We're no longer just comparing ourselves to the people in our neighborhood. We're now benchmarking our lives against highly curated highlight reels of people all around the world. We see smiling faces, luxury vacations, romantic gestures, and success stories, and we internalize the belief that happiness must look like that. We feel like failures because our daily reality doesn't match someone else's filtered fantasy. But what we rarely see are the breakdowns, the anxiety, the loneliness hiding behind those smiles. The truth is, even the happiest-looking people are struggling. They're just better at hiding it. This creates a vicious cycle. We begin performing happiness, smiling for the camera, saying "I'm good" when we're falling apart, chasing moments that are Instagrammable instead of meaningful. And every time we do, we reinforce the lie that everyone else is doing better than us. The pressure to be constantly happy becomes overwhelming. But here's the thing, happiness is not a permanent state. It was never meant to be. It's a fleeting emotion, like sadness, anger, or excitement. Yet somehow we treat it as the baseline for a good life. Instead of embracing the full range of our emotional experience, we pathologize anything that doesn't feel like joy. Feeling sad, you must be broken. Anxious, you need to be fixed. But maybe these emotions are not problems. Maybe they're signals. Maybe they're trying to tell us that something in our life deserves attention, not avoidance. The dark truth is that happiness, as sold to us, is not only unattainable, it's often toxic. The pressure to be happy can make us more miserable than the unhappiness we were trying to escape in the first place. So, what's the alternative? If happiness is not what we thought, then what should we aim for? Perhaps it's time to redefine what a meaningful life looks like. Maybe instead of chasing happiness, we should be cultivating presence, acceptance, connection, and purpose. These things aren't always pleasurable. They often involve discomfort, sacrifice, and honesty. But they're real, and more importantly, they're sustainable. Because unlike the fleeting highs of pleasure or the hollow dopamine hits of digital validation, meaning endures. True happiness, the kind that isn't forced or performative, often comes as a byproduct of something deeper. It's what sneaks up on you when you're fully immersed in a moment, not worried about how it looks or how it compares. It's found in acts of kindness, in shared struggles, in creative flow, and in quiet mornings where nothing extraordinary happens, but peace quietly settles in. But to get there, we have to be willing to let go of the fantasy we've been fed. We have to confront the truth that real happiness is messy, unpredictable, and inseparable from pain. We can't selectively numb emotions. When we numb the dark, we dim the light. When we avoid sadness, we lose access to joy. This is something many spiritual traditions have understood for centuries. Buddhist teachings, for instance, emphasize that attachment is the root of suffering, and that includes attachment to happiness. It's not about never feeling joy, it's about not clinging to it, not making it the sole metric of our life's worth. In embracing impermanence, we actually open ourselves to deeper and more lasting contentment. We also have to challenge the narrative that we're failing if we're not happy all the time. Imagine if we treated our emotional world the way we treat weather. Some days are sunny, some are stormy. We don't take the rain personally. We don't shame ourselves for the wind. We accept the forecast, we prepare, and we trust that the sun will eventually return. In the same way, we can learn to hold space for our own storms, not as signs of weakness, but as essential parts of being human. We must also examine the role of culture in shaping our expectations of happiness. In Western societies especially, there is a deeply rooted narrative that personal achievement equals happiness. From a young age, we're told to work hard, aim high, and check all the boxes: school, career, marriage, house, family. But no one tells us what to do when we reach those goals and still feel hollow inside. That silence is deafening. And for many, it leads to a quiet crisis, a sense of guilt for feeling unfulfilled despite having everything. This contradiction creates a shame loop. We feel bad for feeling bad, which only deepens the emotional hole. And so, we retreat further. Some throw themselves into more work. Others seek out distractions, alcohol, endless scrolling, impulsive spending, anything to drown out the gnawing sense that something's missing. But the missing piece isn't external. It's the absence of space to feel without judgment, to exist without performing, to ask ourselves the difficult question, what do I actually want? And that question is scary because it often leads to inconvenient truths. Maybe we don't want the life we built. Maybe our relationships aren't nourishing. Maybe our career feels soulless. Maybe the roles we play every day don't reflect who we are inside. But admitting that means acknowledging discomfort. And society doesn't train us to sit with discomfort. It teaches us to escape it. It rewards compliance, not introspection. Yet the people who seem the most at peace aren't the ones who've avoided suffering. They're the ones who've integrated it. They've learned to hold contradictions, joy and grief, gratitude and longing, love and loss. They've stopped asking, how can I always be happy? And started asking, how can I live fully, even when it's hard? That shift in perspective doesn't erase pain, but it transforms our relationship with it. Instead of fighting it, we make space for it. And in that space, something powerful begins to emerge: resilience. Resilience isn't about being unaffected. It's about being real. It's about showing up over and over in a world that doesn't guarantee anything. It's knowing that the path won't always be clear and still walking it anyway. The irony is that by letting go of the pressure to always be happy, we actually make more room for genuine happiness to arise, unforced, unfiltered, unchased. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Some of the most important growth in life comes from pain. Not because pain is noble or romantic, but because it shakes us out of autopilot. It forces us to ask questions we might otherwise avoid. It invites us to reconsider our values, our priorities, and our assumptions about what matters. That's not to glorify suffering, but to acknowledge its role in transformation. Without darkness, light has no contrast. Without winter, spring means less. In a way, chasing happiness is like chasing the horizon. The closer you think you are, the further it seems to stretch. But if you stop and look around, right where you are, you might realize that the view is already beautiful. It's just not what you expected. And maybe that's the key. Dropping expectations, letting go of the belief that life should feel a certain way all the time, because life is not a highlight reel. It's a collection of small, imperfect, often mundane moments. And in those moments, if we're present, we can find traces of peace. But presence is a practice, not a default. In a world designed to distract us, being present is an act of rebellion. Everything around us, from the buzzing of notifications to the endless stream of content, tells us to look elsewhere, to move faster, to want more. Slowing down feels unnatural. Sitting still with our thoughts can feel unbearable. Yet it is in that stillness that the fog begins to clear. When we quiet the external noise, we can finally hear the inner voice that has been whispering all along. This voice doesn't speak in likes or metrics. It doesn't compare or criticize. It simply asks, what is true for you? That's where authenticity begins, not with performing a version of ourselves that pleases others, but with honoring what we feel, even when it's messy or inconvenient. Authenticity is a prerequisite for meaningful happiness, and often authenticity requires loss, the loss of old identities, relationships, or dreams that no longer fit. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Because pretending to be happy is far lonelier than being honestly sad. The dark truth behind happiness is that it's not always light and fluffy. Sometimes real happiness hides in hard choices, in saying no when you've been conditioned to say yes, in setting boundaries, in walking away, in starting over. Sometimes it means disappointing others so you can stop disappointing yourself. These are not easy paths, but they're the ones that lead to peace, not just pleasure. And we need to talk about peace, because it's often mistaken for happiness, but they're not the same. Happiness is an emotion. Peace is a state of being. Happiness comes and goes, but peace can remain. Even in sorrow, peace comes from acceptance, not control. From learning to live in alignment with our values, rather than chasing feelings that fluctuate with every passing event. And the pursuit of peace requires a different kind of courage. The courage to stop running. Many of us are running from something: regret, emptiness, fear of failure, fear of being ordinary. But what if we stopped? What if we turned around and faced the thing we've been avoiding? Often we discover it has less power than we imagined. Often the monster in the dark is just a younger version of ourselves asking to be seen, to be held, to be forgiven. And in meeting ourselves with compassion, we begin to build a life that doesn't need to be constantly escaped from. This life, built slowly, intentionally, isn't always exciting. But it's rich, it's grounded. It doesn't need to be broadcasted to be valuable. It doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It just needs to be honest. And when we begin living from that place of quiet integrity, we stop needing to chase happiness. Because happiness then becomes a guest that visits often, uninvited, and always welcome. Another dark truth about happiness is how deeply it's tied to identity, and how our identities are shaped by forces we often don't recognize. From childhood, we're assigned labels: smart, lazy, successful, sensitive, difficult. These labels aren't just descriptions, they become expectations, and they mold the way we see ourselves. We begin to tie our worth, and therefore our happiness, to how well we perform these roles. We become actors in a script we didn't write, and the more applause we receive for playing our part, the harder it becomes to question whether we even enjoy the show. For many, this leads to a quiet kind of suffering. On paper, life looks great. We're doing what we're supposed to do. But inside, there's a growing disconnect. It's the gap between the self we show the world and the self we actually are. And the larger that gap becomes, the more anxiety we feel. Because deep down we know, no amount of external validation can compensate for internal dissonance. This is why authenticity is not just a buzzword. It's a lifeline. And it often comes at a cost. When you begin to peel away the layers of social conditioning, you may realize that your dreams were never really yours. Your goals, your image, even your definition of success might have been borrowed. Returning those borrowed beliefs can feel like loss at first, but what you gain in return is clarity, a clearer sense of who you are when no one else is watching. Yet this process can be isolating. As you change, the world around you might not understand. Some people will fall away, some will resist your growth. That's because your shift disrupts their stability. It reminds them of their own unasked questions, their own ignored truths. But don't let that pull you back into silence. True happiness requires the courage to be disliked by some, if it means being honest with yourself. There's also the matter of grief, the kind that doesn't come from death, but from shedding old versions of yourself. When you realize you've spent years chasing a life that no longer fits, grief shows up as both regret and relief. Regret for time lost, relief that you finally saw it. Holding both emotions is part of the healing, because healing isn't linear. It's messy, repetitive, sometimes exhausting, but every time you choose truth over comfort, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And with that reclamation comes something powerful: self-trust. You stop outsourcing your joy to circumstances or people. You stop needing everything to go right in order to feel okay. You learn that even in chaos, you can return to yourself. That is the kind of happiness that no one can sell you, no algorithm can define, and no amount of external approval can sustain. It's quiet, it's steady, it's yours. And once you begin to cultivate that inner steadiness, you start seeing happiness in places you never expected. It's in the quiet cup of tea before the world wakes up. It's in a deep conversation where you finally say what you mean. It's in the way your body exhales when you're with someone who lets you be entirely yourself. These moments aren't flashy or grand. They don't get posted or praised, but they're real, and they matter more than most of the things we've been told will make us happy.